The best coaches in the game, we really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmets, casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, eighth place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got too many. Tick the tech. Oh man, shit. They got us fucked up. Army, regroup. We pledge always to have that edge. We don't fire warning shots. Competition just dropped. We locked and loaded before lock. Whatever the time, yeah. Do you even correlate?
Being the best requires a willingness to outwork your competition. There's always someone smarter, faster, sharper, more naturally gifted to come around.
Welcome back, DFS Army. This is FantasyFling. We are looking back at DraftKings Milly Maker contest last week, week 13. It was another crazy week, of course, and one of the contestants who took it down actually had two lineups in the top 5. So we're going to take a look at that. And then there was something that I found while studying top DFS pros that I want to share with you. So we will get into that when we do the MME Milly Maker review portion of the show. Let's go. All right. So this is my article that I write every week over at dfsarmy.com. And this is basically the Milly Maker review. So there's several things that we look at when I do this. First, stacking, ownership, leverage, pricing, value, and then just overall ceiling and seasonal trends. So this lineup was another +1 for the QB +1 crowd. So no second pass catcher and no bringbacks in this lineup. As you could see, we just had Geno and Tyler Lockett. However, DK smashed as well. So, certainly could have been a quarterback +2, but it just wasn't needed in this lineup because had Amon-Ra and Devontae Adams, who really were the top 2 wide receivers on the entire slate. So this winning lineup also had a lot of secondary stacks, and that's something that we continue to see, specifically when there's a quarterback +1, is you will often see 1 to 2 secondary stacks from another game, whether they be a game stack or a team stack. Those are consistent. So there was the original stack, the primary stack, which smashed of Geno and Tyler Lockett. Geno, these two combined for about 58 points. And then there was Brian Robinson and Logan Thomas, small secondary stack, didn't need it, could have chose other tight ends. But nonetheless, you can continue to see normally about 2 secondary stacks when you have a quarterback +1 as your primary. Garrett Wilson, 27 points, and Zonovan Knight. So pretty good here. 44 points total between the two. But really, it was the Geno and Tyler Lockett stack from just an overall points, leverage, and salary basis, because 12-1 is quite good for a stack to produce that many points. So when we look at ownership, that's the next thing. You can see Geno, he was one of the top plays on the slate, leverage plays. He was 1% owned. And then you had Tyler Lockett, 5% owned as well. So really good here. Overall, this lineup was 106%. So quite low. The contrarian builds are now on fire. This is 3 weeks in a row with a total team ownership being under 110%. If you're setting your optimizer, if you do back testing at DFS Army, this is something that we normally do. We set it at under 10%. In fact, I'll show you real quick right here. Doing back testing was able to 108%, get it under 110%, and would have won the Milly Maker this week at 231 points, because 229 is what took it down. So backtesting is important. This is something we do at DFS Army. If you're a DFS Army subscriber, you have access to the optimizer and specifically backtesting so many DFS pros can attribute their success to that. That is something that is very important and highly recommend. This is why we do this show too. So use code FantasyFling for 10% off a VIP subscription if you are not a DFS Army subscriber. So, when we backtest, we found under 110%. That's really where you want to be. The seasonal average right now is 115%. And really, that was just because of week 7 through 10 when it was very high over that period. The totals were like 120 to 180. But nonetheless, if you take out those weeks, really the average would be 96%. So we've had 7 out of 13 weeks where we've seen winning lineups under 112%. And that's where we want to be. So top leverage plays, Geno, Tyler Lockett, of course. Geno and Lockett, it was a great leverage stack. And then the Cleveland Browns at 4%. They were easily the best value on the entire slate because they 7x their salary and they were leveraged off of other defenses that they outscored. So the 49ers, for example, were the next closest, and the Browns scored 12 more points than them. Now, Devontae Adams, 10%. And, we look at that and we're like, well, that's not really like a ton of leverage. Well, when you have the top scoring player on the slate, you had to have him. And when you look at other guys like Chase, who was expensive too, like 7,900, and Christian Kirk and T Higgins, and they all scored in the teens and they had ownership above 10%. Yes, Adams was certainly a leverage play. Now, from pricing and value, this is something that, again, if you were a DFS Army subscriber, and it was funny because I was driving in my car listening to the Players Club, and Geek talked about this on Saturday, our live stream of the Players Club. He said this: the field is looking to pay up at running back and pay down at wide receiver. I don't believe that's the approach we should have this week. We're going to do the opposite of that by paying down at running back and paying up at wide receiver. This lineup, you could see, did exactly that to win the Milly. So Brian Robinson, pay down, 5,300. Zonovan Knight, 4,600. No running back in the flex. So 2 running backs average 4,900. You have your pay down, and this allowed you to pay up for Devontae Adams, 8,700. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7,100. So these were the pay ups that really made the difference in the slate and ended up being the difference makers to win the whole thing. And then, of course, the 3,900 Cleveland defense, this really set apart this lineup. And this is why we continue to pay up for defenses in GPPs. Now, you're not going to want to do it in cash games, but we found, looking back at Milly Maker winners, 2020, 2021, average price of defense, $3,000. Right now, it's currently at 2,900, 2,960. So just below where it averages. And you will see, in fact, and I'm not going to take a look at it right now, but we do have, actually, if you click this link, if you go into this article, this will show you the pricing of defenses over the past 2 years and those averages. So ceiling, again, are we seeing a regression of the mean? The first couple of months of the NFL season brought a lot of high scores and thicker stacks. But in the past month or so, we've seen a decline in GPP winning scoring. So since the 268-point winning score in week 9, we've seen scores of 238, 197, 227, and 229. The average during that time of 222 has dropped the seasonal average to now 242.76, which is exactly what we saw in 2020. Now, the reason why we want to know these averages is because they do play a big part in lineup construction. In weeks when the scores are low, the skinny stacks, they're going to be in. Like week 1 on DFS Army VIP Rapid Fire XC won the Milly Maker. So, and I'm going to show you here on my cheat sheet here, roll in a second. 61% of the time, we've seen primary stacks with less than a QB plus 2 pass catchers this season. The average score in those weeks is 227. Now, when there's a QB plus 2 pass catchers used, the average winning score is 266. So I keep track of this every week. From the very beginning of the season, I'm going to write down the lineup, the points, the pricing, fantasy points per dollar, total ownership, the stacks that were used, so on and so forth. And then right here, you will see. So every single week, what the score is, what the ownership was then, and what stacks were used. So, for example, week 3, only 210 points, quarterback +1. Week 4, 252 points, quarterback +2, +3 bringbacks. Week 8, 272 points, quarterback +2. Week 9, 268, quarterback +2. Let's go to another low week, 197, which is crazy low. Quarterback plus wide receiver and a bringback. Another low week, 227, just a quarterback plus a running back. And then again, as I mentioned earlier on, when there's normally just a QB +1, we often have 1 to 2 secondary stacks. So this is something that we continue to see. And these are your seasonal averages in points and then in overall ownership. And again, when we know scoring is going to go a certain way, if we can predict that it's going to be a lower scoring slate, you're probably not looking to overstack some of these games. You're probably looking to do a lot more single stack. So something to keep in mind, of course. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at top DFS pros and what they are doing. Now, I want to start with McLovin's lineup because McLovin is currently the number 1 ranked DFS pro. Move this out of the way. And one thing I noticed looking at his lineups is he did a quarterback. He did a stack, obviously, of Geno plus DK and had a bring back with Tyler Higbee. But he is doing a lot of tight end in the flex and some of his best performing lineups. And this is something that, we don't normally recommend at DFS Army. I just don't normally believe in it. But when the top pro in the world is doing this, we need to probably take a look at it. And one thing I've noticed, and, just kind of touch on this point here, and then another DFS pro did the same thing, is maybe we might want to change our thinking sometimes when it comes to a tight end and a flex. When you're trying to make a game stack work, and specifically here, a team stack work. But the problem is the pricing, right? It's like, oh, we can't really do this stack because it's too expensive. Well, in this scenario, you can if you are willing to put a tight end in the flex. Now, he had a Geno plus DK plus Tyler Lockett. So pretty expensive stack for those 3. Also playing Austin Eckler at 8,500. It's very hard to do that unless you can get a really good value wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, and you can get Robert Tonyan at 3,200 and Pat Freiermuth, who projected very well, and all the top pros were all over Freiermuth in this on this slate. So this is kind of a scenario where I think maybe there are exceptions to the rules. We do play, we have seen the tight end in winning Milly Maker lineups from time to time. It's not something you're going to do a lot. I don't recommend doing the bulk of your lineups, but if you're an MME player and you're looking to get different on a slate, and God knows it's harder to get different, even in, doing a bunch of lineups like this where you're getting different. And look, this one's under 100%. He still had a lineup that was duped. So something to think about. Now, when we look at his overall exposures, he had 6 quarterbacks under 10%. As we're going to take a look at here. No, 6 quarterbacks at about over 10%. Sorry. Marcus Mariota, Derek Carr, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, Joe Burrow. DFS Army, we were all over, Joe Burrow. Some Goff for sure is a great GBP play, and obviously Mahomes. Not the best game for Mahomes. Obviously, didn't come near close to hitting salary. But yeah, 10 quarterbacks over 10% for McLovin. Running backs. So over on Josh Jacobs, and considering the quarterbacks he played, obviously didn't look like the best day, right? Having a lot of, let's go back and look at it, having a lot of Mariota and Deshaun Watson and Mahomes. But when you have a ton of Josh Jacobs at 42% and P. Ryan, who did quite well for his salary at 44%, same with like Zonovan Knight, you could certainly stomach that. Also being under the field on Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones, that certainly helped. And then, so he had Jacobs, but he also had a lot of exposure to Davante Adams. So those two alone really saved him, because 150 lineups to only lose a few $100s. And, that's, you'll take that as an MME player trying to bank the Milly. So Davante Adams, 54%. Obviously, DK was a great play, great leverage play, 33%. So way over the field there. Amari, and then Chris Moore and Nico Collins, the DFS Army domination station was jamming these guys in as well, because they were great fantasy points per dollar plays. So you could see why he obviously had a lot of exposure here as well. If you use a domination station or you're using an optimizer of any sort, one that's really good like DFS Armies, you can understand why it was coming to those players, because obviously a lot of pros were on them too. So over the field on Jamar Chase, George Pickens. And, you'll notice too, a lot of pros, they kind of had a fair amount of exposure to that Atlanta and Pittsburgh game. And really, just from looking at the statistical power rankings, it's not surprising, because both those teams kind of are poor covering the wide receivers. So you thought maybe it might go under the radar and have some shootout potential, but there was just a lot of missed throws in that game. Otherwise it could have been a much bigger day for those players. And then, Garrett Wilson under the field there. You wanted to be over the field on Garrett Wilson, especially at a salary, because he smashed. But under on Christian Kirk and Amon-Ra. And you didn't want to be under on Amon-Ra either. Now, again, we look at this. The surest sign that someone is doing a tight end in the flex is when they are when they have over 20% exposure to this many tight ends. Harrison Bryant, Tyler Conklin, Pat Freiermuth, Foster Moreau, and then Evan Ingram. So, again, a way to get different. And these guys were good plays. This is a great game environment you want to target. Foster Moreau, he gets a lot of targets, hasn't done a whole lot with them, but their offense is very condensed. It's hugely on Jacobs and on Adams. And then Moreau is, a pretty good third there. Freiermuth projected very well. This is something we will see with a lot of the top DFS pros that we're going over. They all had a lot of exposure to Freiermuth. Harrison Bryant was just a great value play. Obviously, Tyler Conklin was good in Mike White and Garrett Wilson stacks. And then just kind of all over the place, not really too crazy on one defense. It's kind of what you want to do because it's such a high variance position. You don't want to really eat the chalk with defense more times than not. You just want to spread out your exposures and hope to be on the positive side of variance. So let's take a look at Giant Squid. Now, Giant Squid, I did see him and really McLovin and Chipotle Addict and Utico on the leaderboards for a lot of, GPPs, not as large, not large field like the Milly Maker, of course, but, like $1,000 to $3,000 tournaments. So just goes to show you, it's all about contest selection. You could smash in those kind of tournaments, but obviously something like the Milly Maker, more times than not, it's not going to be a great ROI day, as we've covered multiple times on this podcast. So again, top three lineups were double tight end. He had Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith. That is a very expensive stack. And, when you listen to most podcasts, they're going to be like, well, I love the Eagles, but how am I going to stack those pieces, right? It's very hard to stack Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Well, some top DFS pros are going to look at it a different way. Well, this is one way that I can stack those players. And really, it was a great lineup, right? Won $1,000, 207 points. And if Pat Freiermuth gets in the end zone a couple times, we're talking about a completely different day for him here. Or just really had, the San Francisco 49ers too. They had a great game, but if they had a Cleveland Browns type game, that's what it takes here. So just a way to get different. And, it's something to think about going forward. If you really want to stack some very expensive pieces, this is a way that you can do it. You're obviously not going to do a tight end in the flex a lot, but in a small percentage of your lineups, if you're looking to double a Jalen Hurts, this is certainly how you do it. And I believe if you do a Jalen Hurts +2, and you put a Love or an Adore on a AJ Brown or Devonta Smith, the optimizer, if you don't zero out the tight end, this is probably what it's going to do, and you just run with it. So yeah, Jalen Hurts again, Freiermuth, Ingram, and then really just got different with some other players in that lineup. Same thing, Hayden Hurst this time, Evan Ingram. Hurst was in a game stack or a team stack with P. Ryan, Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. And this lineup would have done a lot better had Kenneth Walker not gotten hurt. I had the same problem. Would have won a GPP this past weekend had Kenneth Walker not got hurt. But I digress. So let's look at Giant Squid's exposures. Now, he had a lot of different quarterbacks. Very pretty large pool. 12% to Cousins. That's going to be the highest. Had some Kyle Allen, some Geno, some Derek Carr, some Pickett. So Deshaun Watson really wasn't no one he was afraid to use. Justin Herbert, 12%. Trevor Lawrence, 12. Under on Goff, under on Burrow. And, it's kind of crazy, right? 4% ended up being a profitable day, but only 4% exposure to Jalen Hurts. But it was that one lineup that, wins $1,000. So that's all it takes. One lineup to save your bacon. P. Ryan, all over it. Kenneth Walker. And again, if Kenneth Walker stays healthy, gets in the end zone a couple times, probably talking about a way better day for Giant Squid. Dameon Pierce, just a bad team. And really, that's what's killing Dameon Pierce right now. It was a great matchup going against Cleveland Browns, so you could see why Giant Squid was 31% exposure. If this was the scenario, great. Well, unfortunately, Houston was too pass happy. Kylan Allen was just turning the ball over. He was throwing the ball high too many times. The offense, it just wasn't good. So it's on a bad team. This is what happens with running backs. But yeah, Aaron Jones, 29%. Just under the field on Eckler. Josh Jacobs. Pretty surprising to only have 1% Josh Jacobs and still make money on this slate. I can probably guess why. Obviously, that one lineup that we just went over. But yeah, Deontay, a lot of exposure there. Garrett Wilson, so 50% exposure to Garrett Wilson. He smashed. Obviously, over the field on A.J. Brown and Tyler Lockett. You needed those. Well, you didn't necessarily need Lockett, but to be profitable, to have the other kind of exposures that he did, you needed A.J. Brown. So certainly was profitable with A.J. Brown. Yeah, pretty crazy to be under on Jacobs and Adams and still profit on the day. These MME guys, we talk about it so much. It only takes one lineup to make a slate, one lineup to make an entire season for them. And then, yeah, everyone was on Pat Freiermuth, all the pros. And he projected really well. He kept popping up in the optimizers, so no surprise. Evan Ingram, Travis Kelce. Small pool of defenses, but certainly had some of the right ones, right? San Francisco and Cleveland. These were two pay-ups that absolutely smashed. Denver defense, I believe they scored like 14 points too. So really good stuff. All right, so not everyone won money. As we have gone over so many times in these reviews in the Milly Maker, more times than not, they're going to lose money. So top lineup, Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith. Josh Jacobs is a one-off. Perrine is a one-off. And yeah, this lineup was crazy because it really just was one primary stacks, a skinny primary stack, and a bunch of one-offs. So McLaurin, Wilson, Nico, Freiermuth, and Rams D. 112%. This one had Goff plus Amon-Ra and Edwin Ingram as a bring back. Derrick Henry, Perrine is one-offs. Garrett Wilson, Nico Collins, and Devontae Adams. All one-offs. And Ramsey. So skinny stacking it. It's like he listens to this podcast or something. Totally kidding. Everybody who knows Chipotle Addict knows he's top bro. All right, so some of his exposures. Now, he had 16 quarterbacks used. Top one, 20% exposure. Makes me sick. Makes me sicker than binging a bunch of Chipotle would. Derek Carr. Craziness. But these guys, these MME guys, this is what they'll do. They will do things that the field won't do because of that one game. So Carr, Cousins, Kenny Pickett, and really, you saw there was quite a bit of exposure for a lot of these guys to that Pittsburgh and Atlanta game. So Pickett, 14%. He had a little bit of everyone. Kyle Allen, Deshaun Watson. Crazy. Hardly any Jalen Hurts, but just the top lineup, that was all I needed, right? Mike White, way under the field on Herbert, on Mahomes, on Hurts, on Trevor Lawrence. So great on Perrine and on Josh Jacobs. But yeah, if he had 30% Henry, you could see why it was a losing day because he just was nowhere near close. And, you thought that if Philly there was one place you could beat him, it would have been Henry. It would have been the running game. But it was just a very negative game script. So there was no way that Henry was going to have a good day. He just doesn't not have good days in those type of game scripts. So same with Damian Pierce. So, yeah, obviously not a whole lot to look at there. That's all it took was 30% exposure to both of those guys, and it's going to be a losing day. Nico Collins was saved by a touchdown last minute. Justin Jefferson. So, yeah, a lot of exposure to just the wrong guys, right? Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper. Not enough exposure to Devontae Adams to save the day. Just over the field on Garrett Wilson. So that's and under the field on Amon-Ra. So that's pretty much all she wrote on that. So Osimo coming off last week where he had a top 3 finish in the Milly Maker. Couldn't follow it up with another hot week in the Milly Maker. But, he was at King of the Beach, so I'm sure he was getting his party on. I can't blame him. San Diego, I've had some stories in San Diego. It could be tough. It could be tough to focus on anything else in San Diego, especially with that many good people around you, just having a good time. So his top lineup, though, and, one thing with Osimo is he loves to do the very heavy stacks. So Goff, Amon-Ra, and then which this isn't even the one where he went crazy on the stacks. He had another one, but yeah, this one had also Garrett Wilson and Tyler Conklin, and then Devontae Adams, Las Vegas defense, and Josh Jacobs. So a lot of stacks here, really, and just from several games. And then, yeah, Damian Pierce and Nico Collins. So every lineup here was stacked. This was his top lineup, 191 points. And then he had Geno, Kenneth Walker, Tyler Lockett, Zonovan Wilson. Yeah, this is one of them. He had a Trevor Lawrence plus Christian Kirk plus A. Jones plus Evan Ingram, brought back with Amon-Ra. So several plus 3 with the bring back. Here's another one. Heineke, McLaurin, Samuel, Logan Thomas, and brought back with a Saquon bring back. So Kenny Pickett, top guy, right? 28%. Again, that was a game I thought could go off too. I thought it had shootout potential, but the quarterbacks have to hit the receivers when they're open for it to shoot out. And even though those teams are susceptible to giving up big plays, both teams to wide receivers, quarterbacks weren't on, so it didn't matter. Wide receivers a very dependent position. Kyle Allen, 12%. He was just awful, but this is what Osmo does. He does play a lot of different quarterbacks, and he will eat a lot of chalk, as we'll see with some of the skills position players, and then get different at quarterback and do a lot of heavy stacks. So Allen has got some Mariota, a little bit of Heineke, Carr, Lamar. 21 quarterbacks used. Under on Burrow, under on Lawrence, under on White. Pretty crazy. Mike White ended up being chalk in the Milly. Higher than Patrick Mahomes. I did not see that one coming. And then you have Dameon Pierce. Even though he had a lot of exposure to Jacobs, all this exposure to Dameon Pierce was just kind of offset. ETN, not nearly enough from him. Gibson, no. Robinson was getting a lot of the touchdowns. Walker got hurt. Pretty good day from Najee, but not great. Henry, yeah, you could see. Under on Eckler, under on Aaron Jones. And then really no P. Ryan. Well, some P. Ryan, but under, and then no Zonovan Knight. Deontay obviously had a lot of Pickett, so had Deontay as a stacking piece. Probably Drake London as a bring back, but also I believe had some Mariota exposure too. So a little bit of both there. Nico Collins, 36%. Tyreek, Amari, Garrett Wilson just above the field. Obviously a lot of quarterbacks, so a very big wide receiver pool too, because he's going to stack. He does a lot of stacking, so he's obviously not running quarterbacks naked out there. Under on AJ, under on Christian Kirk, Jamar. Fryermuth, love continues. Osmo was all about it too. So last pro we're going to look at, we're going to finish the podcast on a positive note. All right. So Utica, $285 plus positive ROI. Geno Smith, DK Metcalf with Ben Skowronek. Bring back. So David Montgomery, Chicago defense. Perrine. Little secondary stack here of Amon-Ra and Evan Ingram. And then Devontae as a one-off. So that was the top lineup, 195 points. And what really crushes is this is Chicago defense, -1 points. Still made $200, but obviously had a better defense. This lineup does a lot better. Because, there were some great plays here, obviously. And then a Geno double with Lockett and Metcalf. It was really forcing the bring back of the Skowronek here that hurt this lineup, obviously. Dulcich was a great tight end play. Devontae Adams, Damian Pierce, that as well didn't help. The 12 points there. It's not nearly enough to win a large field GPP. Now, Geno was his highest exposure, 16%. Kenny Pickett was third, 13%. And then, Jalen Hurts. So Jalen Hurts and Mahomes, he was over the field on Hurts. So that's how he had a positive ROI day. Under on Burrow, White, and Lawrence. Now, what was crazy is he was under on Amon-Ra. Let's take a look here. Under on Amon-Ra and Christian Watson and Garrett Wilson. And all three of these players smashed for their salary. So you can see negative leverage here. However, 30% Devontae Adams. Obviously, we know he had Hurts. 30% Josh Jacobs. And just even on A.J. Brown. So that's all it really took. So having over the field on Jalen Hurts, even on A.J. Brown, and then Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. Now, Perrine, most exposure we saw the Dalvin Cook all day, that's for sure. Positive leverage on Cordarrelle Patterson. He definitely got into the end zone. Pretty small running back pool. A lot of Keenan Allen and Jamar Chase. Obviously, in that Raiders game, he got 30% exposure to Adams and Jacobs. Probably had some bringbacks there with Keenan Allen. Some DK, some Lockett. And Traylon Burks was looking to have a good day before he got that touchdown where he got that concussion. A little bit of Devonta Smith. I guess I'm going to guess Freiermuth. A lot of Freiermuth. Oh, look at it. 23%. Dulcich, 10%. Conklin, Ingram. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys over 10%. 1 over 20. 6 guys, 7, 8. 8 guys over 10%. And then defense. Now, one thing I remember looking at his exposures. Never ate chalk, right? Was under the field on the chalk. Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Seattle, New York Jets, and just spread out his exposures. That's typically what you want to do. Or you're going to be over the field on defenses that aren't chalky. 1% on Las Vegas. Everyone was too worried it was going to be a high-scoring game. Didn't want to play it. They were only 2,500 and ended up being pretty decent play. Positive leverage. And same thing with San Francisco. So I think that's going to do it. If you like the show and you love watching, please comment if there's anything you notice that I don't notice. Just to contribute to the conversation. It's always moving forward. I appreciate that. And then like and hit that notification button so that you never miss an episode when we go live. I know DFS Army, we do the breakdowns. We go live for those, the showdowns, which we've absolutely been crushing. And then everyone's new favorite show, Tournament Tactics, which, we bring in some of the best GPP minds from DFS Army together to look at the main slate and kind of their tournament strategy. So thank you for watching. I hope you all have the best of luck this week 14. We will see you next week.